again to all BMW riders, and today I'm working on this R1150 GS motorcycle. The problem that this motorcycle has is the throttle bodies. They have some noise and they need to be rebuilt. The rebuild kit that I'm using is this. So it's just basically when rebuilding the throttle bodies, you just replace the bushings that are usually worn out, and they make this clicking noise. After you rebuild the throttle bodies on this bike, you have to sync them and install the throttle position sensor and readjust it. I will be working only on the left side on the motorcycle because I've already rebuilt the other side. There's not a lot of difference. The only thing is that this side has the throttle position sensor that has to be removed and reinstalled again. First thing that you need to do is to loosen these 3 clamps. Now that the clamps are loose, you can disconnect the throttle position sensor by pressing here, pulling down. Next step is disconnect the injector, like this. Next step is to remove the throttle position sensor and the injector. Torx 20 for the throttle position sensor. You will need T25 for the injector. Gently pull the injector up and out. I don't need these here, so let's just leave them like this. This air snorkel you can push inside of the air filter box. For that purpose I use just a little bit of silicone spray. Just like this. Push it inside. There's also one zip tie that you need to disconnect. It's holding the wire that's connected to the throttle position sensor. You have to be careful here not to cut the wire. There's also ground wire attached here. Remove this screw here. T25 Torx. Now at this point you can remove the throttle body from this clamp here. Wiggle it out. Just a little bit of force sometimes needed here. So here we go. To disconnect the throttle cable, 10 mil. Release the nut. Here we go, just like that. And there's like a little spring here that holds it in place. Release it, remove it. Vacuum nipple cover, remove it. Now what you have to do, you have to disassemble the throttle body. If you can hear, it's a little bit loose. There's a spring that you have to release first. That's not very hard to do. Make sure you don't lose the spring, because if you lose it, you're in trouble. That was a little bit tricky. Now there's no tension. The spring also sits on like 2 plastic bushings there. Don't lose them. You'll have to reuse them. Remove the butterfly disc by taking out these 2 screws. Screws are well torqued. They sit kind of tight in there, so you'll need to use some force. Now you'll have to remove the little clip that holds the whole shaft in place. For this purpose I use these pliers. They kind of spread it. You're not going to need this clip anymore because the kit comes with a new clip. So I kind of spread it and get it out. So I loosened the clip. There's a washer, and now you can remove the whole thing. Make sure you don't lose the spring and the 2 plastic bushings that hold the spring in place. Don't lose that. Also on this side there's a rubber o-ring. Remove it. You're not gonna need it anymore because the kit comes with the o-ring. Now the next step, you have to remove this shaft from this. To do that, you'll have to use some chisel or a punch and punch it out. To punch out the shaft, I use these 2 blocks. You can also put it on the vise, but I just used it here. You can also use one of these sockets, like to punch it out, or punch something like this. So let's see how it goes. It's moving. I'm gonna use this, maybe it'll be easier. Done deal. Next step is the fun part. There are bushings in there that are worn out and they have to be removed from there and from here and replaced with the new bushings. For that purpose, you will need a tap. Screw in the tap and punch them out. There's usually no heating required, so yeah, let's see how it goes now. I'm using M10 by 125 tap. So basically what you need to do, you need to screw the tap in into the bushing. Use the bolt that goes through. The old bushing is out now. The smaller bushing is out. This time on this side I used M9. I found it a little bit easier with M9 tap. In the next step, take the bushings from the rebuild kit and install them. There's also an O-ring, don't forget it. That we'll do a little bit later. To install the bushings, I usually lube a little bit. These bushings, they have a groove, so they kind of squeeze a little bit, and it's not really hard to do it. So let's see how it goes. I'll start with the smaller one. Just a little drop of WD-40, just a little bit. I'm gonna try to use the same bolt, see how it goes. It's already like maybe halfway through. Very gently. It's actually easier than I thought. It's already flush. It's already in there. You can actually also kind of squeeze it a little bit with the pliers. It's a little bit easier. Or use a brass hammer. Use this little thing to kind of finish the job. Sits flush and beautiful. Next step is to install the shaft again. 3mm hex, O-ring, and reassemble everything. Now the tricky part will be the spring, but it's not a very big problem. So now it's in place, only the spring needs to be attached. Here we go, it's in place. Now all you need to do is, when the spring is attached, go all the way past this and you're done. Now all you need to do is to push the spring down. Push the spring down and the plastic bushing as well. So that's a little bit tricky, but it's doable. A couple minutes and you'll figure it out. Just a few minutes and you'll be done. Here we go. I'm done. We're using the washer, remember, from here. And a new clip. New clip is a little bit tricky, but a little bit of patience and you'll do it. The tricky part is to install the the disc. When installing the disc, make sure that once you put the disc in and it closes, make sure that just look in the source of light, make sure there's not a lot of light coming through it, and then you'll be fine. 2 nuts on the other side. After you install the screws and nuts, you may want to give just maybe just a very light tap with either screwdriver or a punch or cold chisel, just to make sure that these nuts never fall off even if they unscrew, but that's very unlikely to happen. Just to flatten the ends of the screw just a little bit, make sure that even if the nut becomes loose, it doesn't fall out. That's it. Reinstallation is basically the same thing, just in the reverse order. Before reinstalling, you want to make sure that there's no debris, nothing inside there. So use compressed air to blow off all the debris or whatever may be in there. On the right side of the motorcycle, when you're rebuilding the right throttle body, it's more or less 90% the same procedure, except that you have to remove this little lid here, which I found a little bit challenging at first, but as long as you use the right tools. So just put it in the vise, use just a little cold chisel this way from here, and a few light taps, and it's gonna come off, so don't worry about it. After throttle body reassembly, you can start the bike and make sure it's running fine, but there's another step that's recommended: throttle body synchronization. Synchronization means that basically the throttle bodies are drawing the same amount of air into each cylinder. And also one more step is with GS 911, you have to make sure that the throttle position sensor is in the right position. It's reading the throttle position correctly. And I just reassembled everything, and let me start the bike and see if it starts and if it runs fine. That seems to be perfect to me, but I am not going to skip the next step, and I'll do the throttle synchronization check and GS 911 thing for the throttle body.